All of my work is about memory and nostalgia, and it relies heavily on found objects. So the record player just gets stuck where it gets stuck, and that's the sound it wants to make. Even though most people would say that that's then broken, it's kind of, to me, that's, you use that brokenness as a compositional device. And then manipulating the records came after that, really, to inspire people's memories, but then subvert the memories slightly and just make them aware of that fragility of memory, of that fallibility, of how it is a fiction, and that you create as much as you remember.
Now, look up. Now look down. Wait a minute, I can see it. Keep still, please. There.
Increasingly I like using bits of narrative, spoken word stuff, because often with the loops they kind of generate this ambient looping sort of texture, and then a little bit of spoken word often can fit really well over that. It's a difficult thing sometimes to explain how I don't kind of have this I don't place value judgments on them, because they're very much live process pieces. So the result isn't necessarily the important thing, it's actually the process of generating the sounds. And there's something quite peculiar about having then this archive and listening back to them as music, because you immediately start to analyse them and listen to them as if all of those things that you're hearing were deliberate. That, with repeated listening, becomes a kind of composed piece, trying to eradicate this sense of right and wrong.
You never sort of step outside and say, what's going on, what am I doing?
I do sometimes just look at it and think, what the hell am I doing here? And but then once I start playing, and I kind of, it is like hypnosis or meditation. You get so involved in the process, and it's whether it's with record players or whether it's with charcoal or paint, it achieves the same thing in my mind. It takes me to the same place, and I think potentially that's true of any audience. I think one of the reasons why I work with loops a lot is like for the same reason. And when you look at religious music and mantra, and it's all about loops and it's all about repetition. Yeah, I mean the repetition is very important, and duration and repetition over a long period of time I think is very important, to kind of, I don't know, to alter your mental state, like a mantra, like meditation, chanting, and in the same way with some of the visual art, it's some repetitive actions that I become so absorbed in. It's we were talking about spirituality and that aspect of repetition does something that's akin to meditation, and within creating art, for me it's almost a spiritual activity. It's the nearest thing I've found to a spiritual kind of life. Repetition is extremely important.
How do you choose the duration?
How do you define duration? Yes. Don't know. It's a difficult decision really to stop. I could just play forever. I don't tend to think, right, I'm now going to play for 4 hours. It just happens to be 4 hours. Sometimes it's 4 minutes, and that's enough. Once I start, I think I do find it difficult to stop. There's a sense of wanting to make changes, and it just happens naturally, I think. From 2002, I was saying I was trying to sort of visualise sound. The painting style was a bit like my playing of the instruments. Just throw it all on and see what happens, and that's what happened. And then using the square wave as a device, because I was very interested. I've always liked sort of geometric design, and although it's designed for dance music and 4/4 rhythms, what I do with them is slow it right down so there is no rhythm, that notes just extend into drones. Almost anti-music making in a way, and that kind of reflects how I approach the machine, because I don't have any technical knowledge of sound music making, so I tend to just go in and press every button and twiddle every knob in the same, and that the painting style reflected that. Just kind of throw it on, move it about, and try and drag something out of it that's working. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I think it was just that somebody gave me a record player. And it kind of kicked it off. As far as the environment goes that I've created, this is my sitting room, and this is what it's like all year round. So I brought down all of my mini DVs and all of the DVDs that I have for sale, all of the mini discs of the recordings from the last few years. Everything on here pretty much is either media that I've created or that I've used, or part of the ongoing kind of exploration and memory. This year for Open Studio I've actually developed some print work, which is unusual. I don't end up making products, which can be quite difficult to make a living. So hence the prints, which are mainly of the chapel work, because I feel where I am the traditional art forms are the most popular. The chapel project, in a way, was an effort to develop a project that's very much in this area, and allows me to take these record players and the objects out and play with them, and get an audience. The latest chapel work has led to these maps, which are drawn from memory and then superimposed with chapels. Each of the points on the map relate to different chapels visited, but they're all over, and I take photographs of them when I come across them. So there's this body of photographic work that's kind of randomly selected and shows this journey through the Welsh landscape, but only showing the chapels.
Computers, there were definitely
sure.
attempts to make vibration visible. Incorporate noise, because another aspect of recording that's always slightly repelled me is this quest for the pure signal, which means that you end up as a singer singing in a room that has absolutely no acoustic whatsoever. The program itself is deciding, or the computer itself is deciding what's important about the sound that's going on. To get away from is trying to not make decisions about, oh, this sound is the important sound and that sound is the unimportant sound. Trying to get rid of the value judgments and allow noise to be included.
One of the things that I found really interesting about the chapels is they are very special places in that they served the community in the way that they did, and the way that they still do to a large community still. But they were so kind of fundamental in every aspect of life. All of the art, all of the politics of a village would, all the political discussions, everything would come through the chapel. My friend Lou, she's a very good musician and had been running a choir for some time, but was keen to kind of break out from just being a choir leader and singing teacher.
In the first half, so the next group is 4 different settings.
They had a choir, or Louise had a choir about 20 to 25, and they sang, they made the most beautiful noise, because the acoustics in here is wonderful. Well, the congregation were thrilled, and they sang different versions of Amazing Grace, of how it originated, how they were sung in America, how we sing it in Welsh and to sing in English.
For all of the chapel stuff, we try and strike a balance between the work that we know is going to be possibly offensive to some of the Welsh community, and certainly difficult to those who aren't within the art establishment or aren't familiar with this kind of work. And that's we're still trying to kind of find this balance. And I anticipated it being far more of a problem than it has been.
But you are Welsh.
I was born in Aberystwyth. Up until the age of 10 or 11, I was bilingual completely. I had lots of Welsh friends and there was no difference. Everybody was treated the same in school. Everybody was just a kid. As soon as you go up to the secondary school, you're put into Welsh and English. And even though I could speak Welsh fluently, I was put into good Welsh learner. So it was, even though I spoke Welsh, I wasn't really Welsh. It just meant, okay, well, it doesn't matter how much I make an effort to speak Welsh, I'm never going to be Welsh. So I just stopped. And that's what school did for me anyway, and I feel quite angry about that, because now, when that would be so useful to communicate with the Welsh communities and have that really instant kind of recognition and instant way in without me having to justify my Welshness, I can't. And that's really sad. So for me to come along as in their eyes, an English person doing a project about their culture, I anticipated it being quite difficult and running into some really strong objections. We've actually been very fortunate, there hasn't been much. The first event we did, we had somebody say, any English in a chapel is just wrong, that Welsh is the language of the chapel, and if we're not doing the work through the medium of Welsh, then we shouldn't be doing it at all. We've really sort of made every effort not to be offensive, and it has been paying off. The Welsh identity issue, I think, for people who are English but grown up here is kind of, it is there, you know, it's just something that comes up. It's a bit sad that I'm not allowed to be, to engage with Welsh culture, purely because I don't speak the language. That I'm not considered a Welsh artist, because I'm not doing it through the medium of Welsh. And that just seems bonkers. Well, if I'm not Welsh, what the hell am I? I haven't made a massive effort to kind of take this work elsewhere, because this is my home and this is where I want to work. But it's also about a sense of place, I think, or for me it is. And certainly the record playing in the woods with the gramophone, well, that wouldn't work anywhere else. You couldn't do that in a city. That's one of the things that, with what I do, I try and kind of eradicate all sense of right and wrong, and almost eradicate any skill in the way that I've set up the studio and the way that I treat the records and instruments generally. It's like you don't have to know anything about music to make music, and that's one of the biggest problems I think with music and fine art, is that I have a real problem with elitism within fine art and music kind of establishments, and what that's partly why I don't try and avoid these value judgments, and encourage everybody to join in and do it.
And you are
that's her criteria.
happy?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes. I sometimes think I'm so privileged, I'm so lucky to be able to do what I'm doing, and be able to manage to live doing what I'm doing, that I think if I don't say I'm happy, then that's just horrible. It's awful to be given what I've been given, to have this opportunity to have everything that I want, and then still not be happy. Would just be wrong. So yes, I am. I'm happy.